Hey guys, I've just started recording a few videos for my Year 12s to help them answer some tricky questions. So I've looked through our coursework booklet and decided to do the same for some of these more difficult questions that you may take a look at and think, I know how to explain some of these ideas, but I'm struggling with some of these trickier task words like discuss and evaluate. So in this question, I'm going to run through how I would break down this question. It's question number 6 in your coursework booklet, and I will then flick to how I plan it up. Okay, so let's always start by decoding the question. I started with ICLM. Instructional term is discuss, so I know I'm going to need both sides or an exchange of opinions. And I know the language that I'll need to use are things like however, whereas, and nonetheless. The extent to which, okay, so I'm going to have to make a comment on the extent to which. When I'm thinking about the extent to which, I'm looking at maybe I believe it upholds the principles of justice to a moderate extent. Maybe I believe it upholds the principles of justice to a significant extent. That's along my spectrum of extent. Perhaps if I don't think it upholds the principles of justice, I might say to a limited extent. I have to address this part of the question. So I've got two things I'm thinking about so far. To discuss both sides, but I also need to address the extent to which. All right, the content words here are the role of the jury. So I know that the jury, very quickly I can write made up of members of the community, okay, who fit the eligibility criteria. Who make it through the process of being challenged. Their role is to listen to the facts. They decide on the guilt of the accused, which we refer to as giving the verdict, and they must be unbiased. Okay, they're the core roles of the jury. That's what I know about the jury. I'm just noting those down to get myself started. Second important thing here is the principles of justice. So when I'm looking at the extent to which, I'm discussing the extent to which, not whether I think the jury is a good or a bad thing, but the extent to which it upholds the principles of justice. Now I see here that I've got plural principles, so I have to discuss at least 2 principles. If you've got a preference, you can note them down now. I think, though, that I will try to work in all 3. You don't have to, but the jury is one where you can. So I'm just going to note those down. And notice how I'm crossing out the words as much as possible. Let's say I believe it's moderate. I'm just going to cross this out. This is helping me make silly mistakes in the criminal justice system. Okay, you can see my language from the criminal justice system reflected up here when I'm talking about guilt rather than liability. It's 6 marks, so I know that I'm going to have 1.5 minutes per mark. 1 mark. 6 times 1.5 equals 9 minutes. Now I need to figure out how many points that I'm going to make, points supported by detail, in order to figure that out. I do my divide 2 plus 1 formula. Divide 2 plus 1. That's a 6 marker. Divide 2, 3 plus 1 equals 4. So I know that I'm going to have to have 4 points that I support with detail. So guys, this is my first or second time using this tablet actually, so I'm still a bit scratchy with it. Okay, 4 points supported by detail. You can think about that as 4 IAs. There or thereabouts. Okay, so I've broken down the question now if I use, in this 9 minutes, if I use a minute to decode the question and also to plan out my answer, I'm going to get a much better mark than if I try to just dive into it. Okay. What mistakes you see typically, the mistakes you see most often are people see the role of the jury, they're stressed out, they're limited for time, so they jump straight into the answer and they ignore the task word, both sides. They forget about addressing the extent to which, and potentially also maybe start talking about the civil justice system. So this process is all about setting yourself up to get an awesome mark, and also just to avoid bombing the question entirely. Okay, so sometimes I may just draw up a T-chart. So I could just say achieves, doesn't achieve. But here I'm going to separate my table out in the principles of justice so that I can have all three. So I'm just going to have fairness, equality, and access down here. Okay. So immediately I'm thinking about, all right, so how does the jury ensure fairness, or perhaps how does it not achieve fairness? Now, I'm going to jump over to does not achieve here, because one point that springs to mind is that the jury does not have to give reasons for their decisions, so juries may be biased. They're not legally trained, they're just members of the community who bring to the court their own prejudices. They may bring their own experiences with people who have certain characteristics. The other reason that a jury does not achieve fairness is because juries don't have to give a reason for their decision. We don't actually see what goes on inside the jury room, so I'm fairly comfortable here saying that no reason equals a lack of transparency. Now, if things are fair, they should be transparent. We should be able to understand and see what's going on. So that's one reason why I think juries may not achieve fairness. However, they do achieve equality to some extent, because everyone who pleads not guilty to an indictable offence is entitled to a jury. Okay, so regardless of the severity of your crime, if it's a murder crime, if it's a murder charge, or if it is some sort of serious assault matter, you are still entitled to a jury. Again, regardless of your personal characteristics, age, ethnicity, gender, you're still entitled to a jury if you have pled not guilty to an indictable offence. So we're seeing there someone being treated the same regardless of characteristics. Also, it greatly achieves access because it enables people, regular people, individuals in the community, to be involved in the justice system. And that's a good thing. Okay, it helps people to understand. We know that access means to be able to actually physically use the institutions, but also to understand the legal process, to understand their rights, and to have a certain level of faith in our criminal justice system. And overall, this is a good thing. However, you could also argue that this access is limited by a few factors. Okay, the process for becoming a jury member, there are a number of hurdles you have to jump. You may, in the first place, be ineligible. You may be disqualified. Okay, And then further on the process, you may also be challenged. Both the accused and the prosecution have the opportunity to challenge a certain number of jurors, and they make those decisions tactically. So they, again, judging a book completely on its cover in the case of the jurors, they make this decision based on what they think is going to be the best outcome for their client. And this actually limits the types of people who can access the legal system in this way. Through being a member of a jury. I've got 4 points here. There's a whole range of other things that I could say, but these are the ones I'm most confident with, and I want to get on with my answer. The next step is to choose to choose the order in which I deliver these points. So how can I create flow in my answer? I believe that this access point is my strongest point, so I'm going to lead with this. I'm going to say, however, some may argue that this process actually limits access, even while I've argued over here that juries as a whole do increase access. Okay, so it's first point. Second point, I'd say similarly, or another reason why juries do not achieve the principles of justice is because they may be biased, and this hinders fairness. I'm then going to explain that point. Nonetheless, juries do uphold equality because everyone who pleads not guilty to an entitled offence is entitled to a jury, etc. Have a quick conclusion overall, etc. Okay, so that's how I go ahead and do it. I've put together this plan. You don't have to use this plan, but if you're struggling to answer this question as part of your coursework, this will give you a bit of a guide. I want to turn each of these into an IEE. And if I can do that effectively, I can be looking towards 6 marks. Okay, hope this helps. Thanks, guys.